I'm Melissa Schwab. I'm the secondary literacy coordinator here at Washington School District. I also fill instructional coach duty, and for the coming year, I've taken on an additional position of instructional strategist. If you want more from me, you can follow me on Twitter. I have LiveBinder. We're going to actually use my LiveBinder in a little bit, and you can always email me if you have any questions. Here's kind of how the setup is going to run today. We're going to talk some about your current model, what you are doing right now. I've got some roundtable questions, just kind of spark that so we can kind of get a feel for where everyone is right now and maybe already learn from each other. We're gonna have a roundtable discussion, and then we're gonna take a look at what the research says. I've got a very short video for you. I have one article that we're actually gonna read together and talk about, and then I'm gonna give you some time to kind of explore on your own. I've got a collection of articles for you to look at, and then you're gonna report back on what you find each other, kind of collective wisdom. And then the last section, I'm really going to give you some time to either create your homework policy for next year or take some assignments and make changes to them to make them fit your new definition of homework. So you hopefully are going to walk out of here today with some physical product that you created. So I did come up with one goal for you today, that you will leave here today with a redefined vision for homework and at least one new assignment idea or policy change. So I want you to walk away with at least one thing that you can take into next year. So we're going to just examine our current model of homework. We're going to go through a series of questions here. So the first question is define your homework philosophy. So right now, what is your philosophy of homework in the classroom?
I guess mine, same thing. You know, I started teaching 8 years ago. I had a mentor teacher. I did whatever she did.
Yep.
And I'm still kind of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you teach the lesson, we do practice problems, and then you assign them homework, the workbook pages. You know, you give them time in class, you walk around. With math, I usually pull a small group up and we do like the evens together.
Sure.
You know, those kiddos that struggle. But it's the same thing year after year.
Okay.
Yeah, the same thing. Yeah, I love school. I love, you know, it didn't take me long to get my homework done.
Right.
Like all kids love homework. You know?
Right. Yep. No. Wendy, how about you?
Well, I kind of like you. Whenever I first started, I taught the way that I've been taught, so more traditional. And then over the last couple of years, I've been more like rethinking it. But I teach science, so like kind of where I think now is they need to have practice, but they don't need to have hours and hours and hours of practice doing like, you know, balancing equations or doing, you know, the math problems and things with physics. But so I've been trying to strike a balance between giving them an opportunity for practice, but like you said, not giving them so much that it's going to crush their souls. Because I teach high school, and I teach at a small high school, and the kids that I have are busy, busy kids. And if I'm giving them an assignment that is 15 minutes a night, they've got 3 other classes that are probably giving them more than 15 minutes worth of homework. They've got sports practices, they've got club activities, they've got jobs. So, you know, I don't want to, like you said, crush their souls with this other job that they have to do. But on the other hand, they need to have enough to practice the lesson. And what I'm looking for is like ways to do that efficiently, you know, use my class time efficiently, and still get the same benefit from it.
There are teachers who have gone completely homework free and have restructured their class time so that the practice that would be happening at home is happening in the classroom. They've looked at, like, what am I doing that doesn't need to be there, that kind of thing. And of course, there are teachers that, we'll see as we look through the research, there's a whole continuum. There's people that say no homework for anybody, and there's people that say homework can be a benefit if it's quality, and then, so there's along the continuum. I think what we'll find is that there's not one right answer, and that you'll just have to find what works for you and for your kids, and what it looks like this year might not be what it looks like next year, and what I want to put a bug in your ear is it might not look the same for every kiddo, you know, so that'll be kind of cool to kind of see where we go there. Okay.
I just was thinking, my homework philosophy shifted hugely when my daughter hit 3rd grade, and she was crushed by homework. And this is my 8-year-old having 4 to 5 hours of homework a night. I mean, not every single night, but that was when I really started rethinking. Like, she was, I think, going to gymnastics like 1 or 2 nights a week. That was it. But instead of thinking about my high school kids who are doing so many more things and just thinking something's not right about this and something needs to be different. And I couldn't really control what my daughter was getting, but I could control how much that I was giving my high school.
And it's that question of, if you teach it and no one learns it, did you teach it? So if you assign homework and the kids don't grow from it, or didn't do it, or did it but, found it, or their parents did it, is it better to not give any than to give homework that doesn't actually contribute to what you're doing? And that's kind of the interesting question that we'll run into as we go today. Okay, so next question. How does grading fit into homework?
I can start, because I do have kind of strong opinions on that.
Okay.
So, I don't know about strong, but so I tend to feel like the students' grades should reflect what they as an individual can do, or what their learning is. So my grades are weighted pretty heavily on the assessments, so like tests and quizzes and things.
Look at I'm getting you on the camera. That's what I just did.
And then I kind of feel that way about homework being practice, and that they shouldn't necessarily be penalized, like they shouldn't have points deducted for getting wrong answers on practice. But then you run into the whole thing where, are they going to do it if they don't get points for it? And is it fair that a kid who worked really hard and did thorough work, should they get more points for it than a kid who just slapped through it? So, I have maybe not strong opinions, but I have I've put a lot of thought into it.
Right.
And that's where one of the things I want to do is restructure my grading policy and also my homework policy.
Because they kind of go hand in hand.
They do. It's like you can't separate the two things.
Okay.
So.
Absolutely, yes. And I know at IC, at least the elementary, we grade all the
Everything.
homework. It's hours a night.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Of grading?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
When my son has games, buddy, I'm
You're
sorry,
grading.
I can't drive to St. Louis and watch a football game because I will be up until 2 o'clock in the morning grading homework. And it's ridiculous. But it's if they do it, I feel like I should grade it.
I run into that too.
Yeah. But if I'm doing something and if they're all doing bad on it, I'm not going to take a grade on it. Pass it back out. Let's go over this as a group. And okay. It's to me, that's worth more. Like those light bulb moments. Okay, they get it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot.
Okay. Yeah, it could be crush our souls.
Yeah.
Too. I think grading is probably one of the things that drives teachers out of teaching.
In the past, fifth grade math is still coming to mind. I would feel like I worked so hard to create my groups and watch them in the room with what I was doing with math centers and stations and meeting with them and working with the lower kids and the higher kids and making sure that I was watching the homework assignments I was giving for each one. But then, because we had standards-based grading, I felt like I wasn't always grading the homework that they did at home, because you never knew, were they doing it independently, and are they securing their skills, or are they getting more assistance at home? So the home versus school and what goes down in the grade also mattered.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a big argument for people who choose not to grade homework, is you don't really know what's happening. So does that really reflect their ability?
And sometimes you'll see kids that you're tracking through a chapter and they're showing that they have an understanding on the problems that you're assigning them, but then on a test you're unsure, did they not study? Did they have the assistance from home?
Right.
Where did they fall and why?
Right. Okay. Next question. Describe your current homework model. And we've kind of hit on this a little bit, but right now, how do you handle homework in your classroom?
I tend to do lesson followed by a worksheet for practice, and I hate that I do that, but that's kind of where I've been for a few years, and kind of it's an easy thing to do. But I do tend to give them a little bit of time, 15 or 20 minutes at the end of class to work so that they can continue to get started with me there. And I can check to make sure that they're understanding the work before I bring them off on their own with it. So that's
test that is not covered through the chapter that they will have seen it somewhere from
I teach like 8 subjects.
Right.
Yeah. So, you teach the lesson, and then there's the beloved workbook page, and and we have about 45 minutes for each class. So I'll teach the lesson, and however much time is left over is homework time. And that's when you walk around the room and see if there's any questions. And a lot of times in math, we'll read over all the questions, and if there's something that's really confusing, I don't get that, then we'll do that, together as a group, or I'll get them started with it. But yeah, sometimes, we have these planners that we fill out every day, and after every subject, you write down the homework. A lot of times, there's something in every single subject.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Or is there a way to move some of that practice into class time?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way, do we have to do every subject every day? Is there a way to reorganize it so that, if we've got 8 subjects, we're doing, 5 of them. Maybe there's a couple, maybe reading and math have to be every day, but maybe science can be every other day. Or, is there a way to rethink the schedule so that we can create more time within the day? So this next question is looking at the positive side of it. So in what ways has your homework model been successful? So what are some of the positives of the way that you see homework in your classroom right now?
It's practice.
Right?
So, and, like sometimes with the test, I remember this on the homework.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
So just practice.
Okay. Provides practice.
I feel like mine's fairly efficient.
Okay.
We do, it's an easy way for them to get practice, and since I don't assign a huge amount, it doesn't take them a huge amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
it's a pretty straightforward way. Plus, I've been doing it the same way for a while, so it's not a lot of extra time for me. So,
Do you grade all the homework?
I have gone more to, I've been doing more grading in class, actually, like at the beginning of class. And
Yes.
what I've been doing in a couple of my classes is I'll have them trade papers, I'll give them all a green pen, and my pen, and I'll have them correct each other's papers but not score it. And then I'll collect it, and I'll go through and I'll score it. And I've still been kind of doing points, but that saves me a ton of time because I don't have to go through and give that feedback. They're getting immediate feedback on their homework. And then I can usually turn it around a lot faster, get it back to them a lot faster so they have it to, prepare for upcoming assessments and things like that. So.
I really like that idea of, because having kids score each other's papers in class, you get so many questions and but having them mark it would be pretty easy.
I have to say it every single time, all the way up until the end of the school year, because they're so ingrained. Well, how many points is this one worth? So every time we do it, remember, we are not grading it. We're just
correcting it.
And I also feel like it's a little less because sometimes I feel like it can be uncomfortable for kids.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
Grade each other's papers.
Yeah.
They don't want a classmate to see, how bad I did on this or how much I didn't get it. They kind of still do see that, but they're not seeing each other's
the total.
scores. Yeah. I've been wanting to take it a step further though, and instead of doing a points total, I've read things about doing a check for average work, check plus if it's really good, or check minus if you need more work, and then you kind of collect everything. This may be a discussion for next week too. And then you kind of put everything together into one homework score and kind of assign points to how much is a check worth and check plus and a check minus. So, more of a, I don't know what the word is for it.
Proficiency.
More of, I guess, a proficiency score than a actual numerical score.
So now that we've kind of talked about where we are currently, we can head to what does research say. There are limitless articles about homework. If you're on Twitter, I really encourage you, or I don't know if I do encourage you because that's kind of crazy, but I just typed in, should teachers give homework into Twitter, into the keywords, and then just saw and what's interesting is most of it was just bitter vitriol towards teachers who did give homework, especially on the weekends or before breaks or when projects were due or during testing time. It's fascinating to me just the amount of negativity the idea of homework gives. So that was very interesting. Where's that, is that where we are in our schools and with our kids and with our parents? Is that how they feel? Is it possible that attitude towards homework impacts how much they're willing to learn from you in class? I don't know, but it was really like depressing, actually. I was like, oh my gosh, my goodness. And then, people writing about their littles having, hours of homework, kind of like you were talking about. So that's an interesting thing to do. That was really eye-opening. But of course, there's a lot more than just people's Twitter's opinions out there. So we're going to look at some of that. Now, we're going to use one of my favorite educational protocols as we work through the research today, and it's called See, Think, Wonder. So I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about it now and then refer back to it quite often. This is the tool that you're going to use to kind of gather and process information as we work through the research. So I'm going to ask you, as you're reading, to kind of put back in your mind things that stand out to you, whether it's like a line or a pattern in the research or a particular quote or a statistic, things that you notice from what you read. You're going to kind of try to gather those. And you can just do it in your head. You can make yourself a little chart. You can do however you want to do this, you can do it. I'm also going to ask you then what you think about what you've read at various points along the way. And then the last thing is the wonder, what questions did what you read spark in you? So that's just going to be our protocol that we're going to use to gather and share information as we work through the rest of the workshop. Any questions about See, Think, Wonder? If you're teaching littles or even biggles, you can print this out and have the kids use this, like if they're reading an article. And it's also really nice for, okay, we're going to read this short thing or we're going to do this short thing or whatever, and then we're going to share. And this helps them kind of get their ideas down, and then they have more to pull from when you want to have a class discussion, or you can collect these as like a formative assessment or exit ticket as well to see, man, were they with me? Did they get what we were doing when we were talking about that lesson? So this is one of my favorite protocols to use with big people and little people. So this video is called Homework, How Much is Too Much? So we're going to try See, Think, Wonder with this. Again, you can do it in your head, you can write stuff down, you can, whatever works best for you. Yeah. Can you guys hear that? Barely? Okay, so as we talked about, what did you see in the video that stood out to you? What did you think about what you saw? And what questions came up? So you might not have all three of those there. You might just kind of have a combination, but those are kind of the three things to think about. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to kind of collect your thoughts, and then we'll talk about what you saw, thought, and wondered. Okay. As we watched the video, what did you see, think, or wonder about what you saw?
I think I've seen that video before,
Uh-huh.
actually. So the information wasn't new to me, and I've seen the thing about having 10 minutes per grade level
Mm-hmm.
homework. And I don't know if it needs to be, like, I don't know where I'm at on the See, Think, Wonder, but does it need to be that clear-cut? Does it have to be, by those rules? And then I question, like, for high schoolers, because I teach high schoolers, I know the research says that it's most beneficial for high schoolers. I wonder how beneficial is it actually? So I've heard that before, that it's more beneficial for older kids than it is for younger kids, but how much benefit do they actually get. Is it worth assigning, if you have a 9th grader, 90 minutes of homework every night? Is it really worth it?
And that's total, not per class.
Right.
Which I think is really important to understand because,
Right.
I've seen kids that probably had 90 minutes per class per night,
And still,
depending
to me,
on what they
if a
take.
9th grader has 90 minutes of homework a night, if you're talking a 9th grader who's, a volleyball player that has homework, they're going to be at volleyball practice for 2 hours after school, and maybe they have a job where they go work for an hour, and they're maybe not getting home until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and then piling on another 90 minutes of homework, and that's where, the whole sleep deprivation and the physical health problems and things come into play, I think. So.
What else do we see, think, or wonder?
And I've heard too about that 10 minutes per grade level. And I liked where it said like to concentrate on the family time. Because I think we lose sight of that. Like, we're a Catholic grade school and, we give all this homework. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we're all about.
Interesting, yeah.
And I'm a worrywart. Like, I'm stressed out all the time, but to see that high schoolers get stressed out about homework.
Oh my gosh.
And
I see it every day.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And we have very high achieving students at New Haven, very grade driven.
Yeah.
So, they're
There's
stressing
the issue.
out. Yeah, and that's a big issue.
That's heartbreaking. And then I'm like, am I doing that to my 4th graders too?
Right.
Well, it's kind of a learned behavior too, or a learned mindset where, they start out in the younger grades, homework's important and the grades are important, and then that carries through and it gets more and more important as they get older.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's a great, simple rule to follow, and one that most teachers have heard about keeping it 10 minutes per subject or per grade level. But you were saying earlier your daughter's in 3rd grade. And
no, she's in 8th grade next year, but that when she was in 3rd grade.
So it seems like if you would check in with your families, how many families are truly spending that required amount of time or the recommended amount of time on the homework, it seems like you'll probably run into more families that spend more than what you think on it. So going back to the original questions of, is it meaningful, is it helpful, is it aligned with what you're trying to achieve through the standards in your classes?
Well, and one thing that I was reading that they were talking about this 10 minutes. 10 minutes for who? 10 minutes for grade level for who? For which kids? Because if I'm designing the homework and was a great student and I've taught it for 10 years and I look at the homework and I think, this will take 10 minutes. But for which kids? For me? For my best kids? For my strugglers? If I'm assigning something that takes 10 minutes for little Polly Perfect, Bobby struggles a lot over here. It might be taking 30 minutes with that same assignment.
Well, that's a very valid point because when I talked about my daughter when she was in 3rd grade, my daughter, my daughter is an extreme perfectionist, and she gets it, honestly. But she was spending hours and hours and hours on her homework, and she was doing these story questions, and she's gotten so much better since then, but she messed up one word, she'd erase the whole thing and have to go back and do it again. So I tried talking to her teachers about it, and hey, look, Ava's spending all this time, and they're like, well, the other students finished in class, or they're not spending this much time on homework, but my daughter was, and we'd sit there, both of us, in tears because she was struggling so much. And it wasn't that she wasn't understanding it; it was that she was putting so much pressure on herself. So it's not just like your brighter students or your more academically gifted students are going to get it done quickly, and then your lower level ones are not. Sometimes it's these kids, and I've got high school students like this too, who will spend a lot more time on their work than they should, and then other kids who they're smart, but they just kind of slap through it and they don't care as much. So it's a very complicated question, I think, is
right. How do we differentiate for all the kinds of kids that we have? And still make it fair and equitable homework.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna take a look at a couple of articles. We're gonna start with this first one. The first one is called "What's the Right Amount of Homework?" So I'm gonna let you click on that link, and then take some time to read it, and then we're doing the exact same thing. See, think, wonder. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and talk about article number 1, and then we're going to take a look at article number 2, which is, I think, something just from listening to you guys that you're really going to like. So we'll talk about article number 1 first. So again, think back, things you noticed from the article that stood out to you, or things you thought about what you read, and things you wondered, questions that you have. So,
like a kid transitioning from one year to another, and the parents getting used to expectations, making sure like grade level teams are a little more in tune with each other, and that there's a gradual step happening from each grade level.
When it read in that, when it said in their school-wide policy, it made me wonder, like, do your schools have a school-wide policy? Wouldn't that be cool if that was part of the beginning of the year activities, where we make a school-wide policy or we review our school-wide policy, and we are, like you said, all on the same page, or at least we know what the expectations are for every grade, and everyone is doing something similar. And I think that goes into a lot of things, but if you think about it, if there's 4 fourth grade classes, and in one class, they're doing an hour of homework a night, in another class they're doing 10 minutes of homework a night, and kids walk out with an A in both classes, they didn't get the same experience. And I think that really caught my eye too.
There was something, I think, about the elementary students. There was a second grade teacher I worked with who had some type of homework club, and right now I couldn't tell you the details of how she used it, but I remember talking with her in meetings, and she would say more students are doing their homework because they're more motivated, they're not pressured to have to do the mandatory work. So I think she had something like the monthly homework club, and they could keep their club moving if they would come back each day with their homework finished. But I think she also tried to balance it so it wasn't so overwhelming, like homework every night in every subject. So
Right.
I'll have to ask her for
Yeah, I like the idea of a homework club. That's kind of cool. Yeah, very different.
I think good for elementary, but
Right.
still having to tweak it somehow for junior high and high school.
We just had 8 hours if you don't do homework, which is,
Right.
I think, not the norm at all at other schools where, there's no consequences for not having your homework done. So, but at our school, if you don't have your homework done, the teacher can assign an 8th hour, which is an after-school detention, and to stay for 50 minutes after school and finish that assignment.
Because the idea there is, if it's important enough to give, then it's important enough to require it to be done. Other things you still thought or wondered in the article?
There was a note in there, I think this was under the elementary, but the quality is more important than the quantity of the homework, and that the focus should be on cultivating the love of learning versus just doing the homework, doing the homework. And then I kind of skipped ahead then and kind of focused on the high school because that's what I teach. And it did say in there that, because we were talking about like how much is too much, for high schoolers, but it said less than 2 hours would be the maximum that you would want your high school kids to be doing across all classes, and that it should be doable without their assistance, which is something that I want to try to be cognizant of this upcoming school year, because I think sometimes I assign homework and they've had some in class practice, but they're just not quite comfortable with it yet, where they can do it on their own. But then I also, there was something in there about preparing them, I don't know if they talked about preparing them for college, but it said that they're becoming more independent learners, which made me think about, I have high school kids. The next step they're taking is going to college, and when you go to college, you're going to lecture 3 hours a week, and you're expected to do a lot of the learning on your own outside of class. So I also feel like that needs to be part of my homework philosophy too, is that they probably do need to be doing something, not a lot, but outside of class, independent of me, because I think that they get really dependent on their teachers to teach them, and when they go to college that can be a big struggle because that's not the case at all. They're expected to do a lot more independent learning, and I think that can be a big stumbling block for kids whenever they transition from high school into college.
Of course, that only applies to a very small percentage of your kids too. So for specific classes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, right, because I have a couple of senior classes, and so maybe those are the classes where I assign a little bit more. So I guess kind of my wonder on all of that was, how do I strike that balance in my classroom between giving them enough practice and giving them enough guidance, and then also
part of that flipping a little bit actually comes into play there. I know you've probably read about flipped classroom, and I know I've tried flipping before, and I don't like taking all of the responsibility for learning out. But one interesting thing about that is, what if the homework is learning the skill, and then in class they're actually doing the practice? So like take math, for example. A lot of times what we do is we think, okay, I'm going to teach the mini lesson and I'm going to model and well, what if we said, okay, for homework, I want you to read through this lesson, take some notes, whatever, depending on the grade or that, and then they get into class, and the first thing they do is, instead of you teaching the lesson right there, you go ahead and have them do some practice problems. And then you see where the kids are, and then you teach what you need to teach based on how much they knew from when they taught themselves. And this is giving them an opportunity to do some of that learning on their own, but then you're coming in and you're picking up the pieces, right? But you're seeing the practice happen in class. Because sometimes I feel like, the part that we need to, if we're assigning homework so that they can practice something, well, can they practice it without you? Or is it more beneficial to them to be practicing it in front of you so that you can then be guiding them through that process? So maybe sometimes we do the wrong part in class. So homework doesn't have to be the doing of the problems necessarily. So I think we can rethink what part of our lessons are homework sometimes. It doesn't mean we don't teach, but it may change when in the continuum we teach, or how that process kind of unfolds itself. And then if kids don't read or they don't do this or that, then that comes back on them, and they have a harder time in the classroom, and they may learn to be motivated to do the work so that they don't struggle. Not because it's a grade, but because they don't want to struggle with the practice. So it might change the way they think about the homework itself. Other See, Think Wonders from the article. Anything else?
And I, too, like the quality, not quantity. And where it said at homework, the purpose of homework should be to review concepts learned in class. And I was surprised, I guess, when it said younger students don't have study skills. And that's something that I try to teach.
Yeah.
Like we do Missouri history in 4th grade. And, that the headings are in blue, as we're talking about, the Missouri Compromise. Are you going to look underneath the section, of the Louisiana Purchase? No. So we kind of talk about that. But that was surprising. And then the 2nd grade teacher that dropped homework, and she noticed that kids actually started doing more work at home.
Yes.
And that if parents have positive attitudes toward homework, then kids are more likely to share that. Like I said, our parents are very involved.
Right.
And sometimes a little bit too much.
Helicopter.
Yes. Because they are worried about those homework grades, because like I said, I grade everything. And then, but homework, it's not weighted. It's just 100%. Like for test in elementary, we do like test over, 2 homework scores.
Right. So how many homework scores, like in a unit, how many homework scores would they? Yep. So the test actually, so they're getting weighted very heavily on their ability to learn, not their ability to express the skill at the end.
Right.
That would be concerning for me as a teacher, and I can see why it would be for you too. Something to consider. You guys are all in small schools, so you may not see this as much, but one of the things that talked about there, and I think one of the things you see a lot in the research and from experts, is that one problem with homework is when you send that home, you're not sending that to the same home. So every kid has such a different environment, and a lot of kids may not be completing the homework not because they're lazy or don't want to do it, but because they don't have a quiet space. They don't have a desk. They're watching their 3 brothers. They're whatever. There's so many more things that happen, and you're sending homework home to families where parents want to help, but then maybe in some schools there may be 2 kids like that, and there may be 5 kids where the parents don't speak English. So who's helping those kids with the homework? So sometimes homework can actually increase the achievement gap because we're sending home this homework to these places where not everybody has an equitable situation and the ability to do the homework and the resources.
That's definitely not just a large school problem, because every single one of those things that you just said happens at our small school.
Right. Yeah. And like, I think as teachers, we can get in a bubble where we just assume that everyone had the homework environment we had. And maybe none of them do.
This concludes the roundtable portion of the PD session. At this point, participants were invited to do some independent exploration, including looking in Melissa Schwab's live binder, which has several resources that had to do with grading and homework. Encouraged to search Twitter, do their own Google search, and then they put the information that they found into a presentation. See, Think, Wonder is an option, Google Slides, on paper, whatever suited them. Then those presentations were shared with the group. After that, participants were encouraged to reconstruct their homework model. Based on the discussions from earlier in the session, participants were given independent work time. If you would like ideas on what to work on as you reconstruct your own homework model, you could consider doing some further reading and research, creating your own homework policy, looking at some of your homework assignments and reworking them, or creating different ones that match what you now believe about homework. This concludes the PD session on redefining homework. Thank you.